In this special episode of JPost Sits Down With, our editor-in-chief, Zvika Klein, speaks to Bondi Beach survivor Arsen Ostrovsky. Ostrovsky is an international human rights lawyer and a JPost contributor, and was attending the Chabad Hanukkah by the Beach event when the shooting broke out. He was wounded by a bullet in the head, and today he shares a little bit of his story with us.
Hello, Arsen.
Hi, Zvika. How are you?
I'm okay. I didn't go through any life-threatening experiences lately. How have you been holding up?
It's a question that used to be so mundane less than 2 weeks ago, but now it's undertaken a whole new meaning. Look, to answer your question, I feel alive, and less than 2 weeks ago, that wasn't a given. When I got hit in the head, and I fell down, and I sent my wife a bloodied picture of me with the words "love you," and
Oh my God.
not knowing if that was going to be the last two words that I said to her. The bullet was very close. The doctor said it was a miracle, that it was literally millimeters between life and death. And so I didn't know if those were going to be the last two words I said to my wife. And then just yesterday, we happily celebrated our anniversary. So that was a
Wow.
beautiful thing.
Wow. So those that don't know you, even though, a lot of people know you even more now, but you're very active on social media, mainly in the space of, pro-Israel advocacy. You're a lawyer. You manage different organizations in Israel, and you actually, you lived in Australia before you made Aliyah, but you actually moved back for a period of time, just a few months ago, I think. No,
A few weeks ago.
a few weeks
A
ago.
few weeks ago. I grew up in Bondi. This is my area.
Yeah.
This is my beach. These are my people. I grew up here, but I've lived in Israel the last 13 so years with
By the
our
way, you
family.
grew up in Bondi
Yeah,
as an immigrant.
correct. Yeah, that's true.
So like you have, that experience
Yeah.
where, and Australia accepted you, I assume.
Oh, with absolute open arms. The Australia that I grew up in was a beautiful, wonderful, tolerant place. It had always been a beacon and really an oasis of peace for the Jewish community. It was, one of the absolute best places one could imagine growing up. But this is not the same Australia that I'm returning to. This is a very different Australia. This is one where, especially in the last 2 years since October 7th, but including before, but especially the last 2 years, we have seen as, anti-Semitism just explode unabated. And, even 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks after the Bondi attack, today we hear that in Melbourne, a rabbi's car with a Hanukkah logo on top was firebombed. So
Right.
every, hardly seldom a day or a week goes by without reports of a synagogue attacked, a Jewish school graffitied, Jewish businesses damaged. And then as we saw just 2 weeks ago, the most deadly imaginable manifestation of this anti-Semitism on the beaches of Bondi.
Right. So I'm going to go back because I
Yeah.
cut you off there, but so we know each other for a while, and I think we kind of respect each other and love each other.
That's
But
that's that's fair to say.
I remember, having conversations with you in the past 2 years. I think our children are probably about the same
Yeah.
age, and you were like going to take a break, not from fighting for Israel, not from being a proud Jew, but you're going to be working in a different environment and hopefully giving your family and yourself a bit of peace and quiet because
Yeah.
every single Israeli in the past 2 years has lived in a very unnatural or
Yeah.
not normal circumstance. So so you literally just like moved in, and then suddenly this happens.
Look, you're right. Australia hadn't been on our agenda, so to speak, earlier in the year until, and the reason we came here is because I was approached to take up a senior leadership role in the Jewish community with the organization AJAC, which is the Australia and Israel Jewish Affairs Council, which is one of the leading Jewish organizations here in
Which
Australia.
is kind of, they probably don't like when it's said, but it's kind of like Australian version of APAC.
Well, it's very unique in the work it does, but it's one of its primary missions is the combating of anti-Semitism, but also supporting Israel and the Australia-Israel alliance. So so this is the primary reason that we came here, and you referenced my children or our children, and when we told our kids some months ago that we were moving to Australia. My oldest, who was 8 years old, looked at me and sort of in those puppy eyes that only an 8-year-old kid can have, and said, "Abba, does that mean no more boomies?" Meaning no more rockets, sirens, runs to the bomb shelter, which, as our children have seen far too much, far more than any child ought to ever. And I said, "You're right, sweetie, no more boomies. We're going to Australia. That's a long way away from boomies." And Zvika, it pains me. It pains me that I was wrong.
Yeah.
When I saw what I saw that day, that dark day now on the 14th, it was like a war zone, except it wasn't the Middle East. It was Bondi Beach, Australia. Something I thought
Where
was
you grew
unimaginable.
up, like it's the same scenery. Probably looks pretty much the same.
It's a glorious beach. Everyone that comes to Australia, they know Bondi. It's impossible to not go to Australia and not stop by Bondi Beach. It's one of the most iconic, not just beaches in the world, but places in Australia. And it's synonymous with families, with joy, and, as beaches are, and especially as this was on the 14th with the Hanukkah festival of all things, and everything that symbolizes with children and families, and it was a beautiful, joyous experience until that moment.
Wow. And then, so, you send your wife this picture. They weren't at the event?
They were, Zvika, they were at the event. We were there together.
You were separated.
So what had happened, we, my wife and our two daughters were, had just sat down because it was the first night of Hanukkah and the candle lighting ceremony was about to start. And I had just moved off a little bit just to get some food. And then the plan was to rejoin them. But as I was in line getting food, the shooting started. Now, at first, I thought that it was balloons, there were some kind of fireworks, because, again, there were a lot of children and there were kids' activities. But then it was like bang, bang, bang. And you understood very fast that, this was something serious. And you saw people start running every way, some falling. You saw smoke billowing from the ground, and I ducked for cover in the nearest spot I could find. But then I immediately, stood up to make a run for my wife and kids, because they were about 20 meters away from me, meaning that they were about 20 or so meters, 20, 30 meters closer to the shooter, and they would have been in a completely open, exposed area. But the moment I stood up and started to make a move, I got shot, and I fell to the.
Did they see you?
No,
or were they at their backs to you? So like they
did not see me, and I'm grateful they did not see me. In that moment. It was only afterwards that I had found out that that my wife and children, that they would have ran right past me or very close to me without knowing where I was. Now, in hindsight, they were extraordinarily lucky, because they would have been in the line of fire of the assassins. And on the right of me was a man who was lying on top of his wife, and it was like he was shot, and it was like someone had turned on a faucet, and the blood was just drip, 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 dripping. On the left of me were two people, one of whom I saw body parts strewn. And I happened to be in between them, already bleeding out myself. And my wife and kids they would have ran very close past that, and they ran right through that, and thankfully right towards the beach, and sort of hid by the sort of the footpath or the tail of the on the sand with some other families. So they got extraordinarily lucky, but the not knowing those sort of 10, 15 minutes, whatever they were, if they were safe, was the most extraordinarily difficult, longest moments of my life. I had called my wife, I couldn't reach her. And then that's when I sent her the photo, and it was only afterwards that she had sent me that they were okay. And you want to know what I said after I got that message? Now,
I'm sorry.
Now, after I received the message from her, and again, there are things that I'm recalling with time now, certain things that trigger my memory. And, you know, I'm not the most religious person. I'm a man of faith, but I'm not the most religious person. And I recalled only reading someone else's story that after I'd heard from my wife, I started reciting the Shema, Zvika, because I did not know if those were going to be the last words that I said, and I cannot tell you now what compelled me to say them, except that I did. And thankfully, I managed to get to safety with some absolutely extraordinary people, from surf lifesavers to the opposition leader, who's a politician, but she was there just as a person, risked her life. People from running across the street that had helped.
Oh, she was. So I saw her speaking at an event, right?
Yeah.
So and she mentioned you.
Yeah.
So she was actually at the lighting.
She wasn't at the lighting. She was nearby, but once word spread that something was happening, her name is Kelly Sloan. She got in the car with one of the first responders from Hatzalah, and they drove to the site, and they parked under the footbridge where one of the terrorists was. At that point, not knowing that he was above them, but knowing that the shooting was still happening. And she had, like Mindy, the medic, you know, they had comforted people. They had helped them to safety. She sat with me with a hand around me until someone else came by to offer assistance, and then she moved on to help others.
Did you know each other before this?
You know, we hadn't met, and when she came up to me,
you probably would have met her, like, you know, on a professional level.
I would have, you know, I mean, I was barely 2.5 weeks. We're barely 2.5 weeks in the country, and she had sat next to me, and I looked at her and said, "Are you Kelly Sloan?" And she said, "I'm just Kelly. How can I help you? What do you need?" And, you know, she's a politician by day, but she was just Kelly. And she was one of many people. And, you know, when people ask me, you know, about the event, and, you know, what I choose to take out is not the monstrous hatred and evil of the shooters, but it was the humanity display and the courage displayed by everyday ordinary Australians, from surfers that came from the beach, from first responders, from security, from people like Kelly, from the Jewish security people who were there, and who the police, that risked their lives, that provided comfort. There was a man next to me. He ripped off his shirt to give to me so I can use to help stem the flow of blood. So that's what I choose to take over there.
And when did your wife find out that you were okay? Because, you know, that picture that you sent her, you know, wasn't necessarily reassuring, even though I think you wanted to reassure her. But,
you know, so I took that picture for two reasons. One, and first of all, I wasn't the one that even posted the picture. Someone else
by the way,
done that.
I know you weren't.
But that's okay. I was okay with that. I took that picture, one, to see how bad I was injured, because when I got hit, it's difficult to describe. I knew something had just happened, and all of a
Yeah, you said it was dripping, so you can't see
well,
that
it
part of
wasn't
your.
even just. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
dripping is almost something, if you have a bloody nose.
yeah,
This was like
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
blood just
Gushing,
started
gushing.
just gushing
Wow.
out, and when I put my hand on my head, I could feel it was like the flap of my skin had opened up, so
Oh
I
my
could
God.
feel it. And then when I looked at my hand, it was, completely red. So I'd also lost a lot of blood, and in a moment like that, your adrenaline kicks in, and
Hmm.
whilst
Yeah.
you might think, oh, maybe I'm okay, it's somewhat sort of deceptive reassurance, because you don't know. And it was only afterwards, when I spoke with the doctors and they did the scans, they could see that it was literally, according to them, it was millimeters between life and death. They had to operate to remove, because what they thought was some fragments also still from the bullet that were lodged. So it was a miracle, but I can't tell you, and I don't have the answer for why I had a miracle, why someone was looking after me, but why not 10-year-old Matilda? Why not
Hmm.
87-year-old Alexander Klein, the Holocaust survivor? I don't know why I
Yeah.
was the lucky one, but what I do know is that I survived, and so I'm surviving, and I'm speaking with you, and I'm sharing the story, and I'm recommitted to having a second chance at life, and to doing what I came here to do, and to fight this scourge of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism.
Right. So first of all, I mean, obviously, God works in ways that we will never know. And then you're right. I mean, when you're in that type of experience, it's really, it's really
Yeah,
it really shakes you up, and it makes you think think and appreciate your life, I think, a lot more.
absolutely.
But immediately, when your picture starts resurfacing on social media,
Mhm.
there's a huge wave of terror. I don't know if we call them people, but who are saying, "Oh, this is Arsen, the pro-Israeli influencer. So he's putting makeup on his head, um, you know, trying to show that it's not real or whatever."
Yeah.
And it wasn't like one or two people. It actually became like a mini trend.
Do you know when I saw these pictures? As
Probably only, yeah.
literally moments just before I was being wheeled into the operating theater. That's
Okay.
when the pictures started flooding my phone. I was starting to get comments, and um, look, a part of me doesn't even want to dignify the sick campaign of hate and lies with a response, but it is part of this campaign of warfare and misinformation, disinformation that we're dealing with. And we can see that words have very real consequences. Words, when not challenged, when left unchecked, lead to incitement and violence, as we saw. Now, this opens a whole can of worms and questions that need to be asked in terms of what is the role of social media companies that allow this to proliferate,
Hmm. Hmm.
because they ultimately too share the blood on their hands.
Right. And those that don't know you personally and they just know your, I would say, social media, your ex Twitter presence, think you're like this tough Israeli who's, on the battlefields, but you're actually like a very sensitive and kind of quiet person. And I wonder like how you react to these types of, attacks, or maybe you're just used to
Mm.
it.
I don't think anyone can ever get used to it. I have spent years, telling stories of terror and resilience, working with victims, with hostage survivors, documenting atrocities. I never imagined that uttering the words, I am a survivor. And so
Hmm.
it's a very different role that I've been placed in. I'm used to telling the stories of others as opposed to being the story myself. So it's a very very different situation, and someone that has, advocated, and fought, and, in the field of combating anti-Semitism for as long as I can remember. This provides, on the one hand, a very different perspective of my own lived experience now of terror and anti-Semitism and the urgency of which we're fighting this. But, I've also seen, I've seen the worst of humanity, and I've seen also the best of humanity, the way people have come around. And the Jewish community here in Australia, it's the most remarkable community, Zvika, in the world, and I hope you get the chance to experience it in a beautiful way, has just come together.
I may come visit you soon. Don't
please do. But it's the most wonderful community that's just come together.
The Jewish community there is exceptional. I think there's so many things.
It is exceptional. It is heartwarming.
It is the world you could learn from.
The one thing I will tell you, having lived in Israel the last 13 years, not least the last 2.5 since October 7, I can tell you that the Jewish community here in Australia, just like our community in Israel, is the most tough, resilient community that you will ever have the fortune of meeting. The way we've come together, just as we did in Israel, the way we have fought back, the way we continue here to wear our kippas, to put on our mezuzahs, to be proud, open Jews, even in spite of everything, is something truly remarkable. But I would also say the way the broader community here, the non-Jewish community, have come together, because, this was an attack on Jews, and Jews specifically, who are celebrating Hanukkah. This was a religious family festival, but it was an assault on the very fabric of Australian society as well, which has been going on and on for the last 2 years, incessantly, without pause, without any kind of respite.
And, because there's so much news, people don't grasp the magnitude of what the Australian Jewish community has gone through. Like, and myself, I actually think I actually try and follow like news in Jewish communities, but like I totally missed the fact that Alex Rivchin, did I say his name? His house. So his house was torched. And his car was torched. He had to move, right? And in January.
Yeah. And Alex, by the way, is one of my closest friends. His family and my family both emigrated to Australia from the former Soviet Union at the exact same time. The warning signs here, Zvika, were impossible to miss.
That's not a swastika. That's a whole new level.
On October 9th, 2 days after the attacks, if you recall, the most unbelievably jarring scenes when a mob descended upon the Sydney Opera House.
That was literally the first place. Israel was still October 8th, I think.
And they came chanting, against the Jews, or where are the Jews? So this was 2 days after October 7th, as we're still collecting bodies in Israel. And this is, every day it has progressed and progressed, and each incident has been met with predictable pro forma statements of concern, promise of review, assurances of action. They've never came. This is not a failure of awareness. This is a wholesale failure of leadership across the board. How many warnings does the Jewish community, how many times does the Jewish community have to plead with the government? Listen to us. We need action. Listen to us, because if this hate goes unchecked, it will lead to violence. And we saw that deadly manifestation.
I saw you say somewhere, I saw you say somewhere, like, stop saying we condole and we support the Jewish community. Like, do something.
Look, absolutely. We don't need another promise of action. We need urgent, decisive action now. And sadly, the government had been warned time and time again, but it refused to heed the concerns of the Jewish community. And we saw the deadly ramifications on Sunday, the 14th.
Yeah. Just shortly, Ahmad al-Ahmad became this, Australian hero.
Yeah.
Did you meet him?
I haven't had a chance to meet him. He is still, I believe, in hospital, and he was in a different hospital to where I was. Look, he's an absolute hero and deserves all the recognition. This again, I choose to take out of this not the heinousness and the evil of the terrorists, but the heroism and the humanity of everyday, ordinary Australians. People like Ahmed, people like the husband and wife who attacked one of the terrorists as well and lost their lives. People like Kelly, people like the surf life savers, the first responders. This has been extraordinary. This profound gives me a profound sense of hope. I can also share with you, and it's important. The concern from Israel has been incredibly touching. President Herzog called, Prime Minister Netanyahu called, Minister Shikli, the diaspora
Particularly visited
minister.
you in the hospital.
He
I
did,
saw,
and you know what? And he got on, I think, one of the first planes from Tel Aviv to Sydney, and he visited me in the hospital along with the Israeli ambassador, which was incredibly touching. Albeit, I'm not sure the hospital was used to having this many security cars for such a delegation. And they actually snuck in some sufganiyah because it was still Hanukkah then, which was beautiful. Even here in Australia, the Premier of New South Wales, Chris Minns, he called and he's spoken with me. So that's been incredibly heartwarming to see how the community has come. And at the end of the day, this has to be a watershed moment. Enough is enough. This has to be a moment of a turning point where the government finally listens to the concerns of the community and shows, an unwavering resolve to actually deal with the issues, deal with this hatred, because this is not just a Jewish issue. This is an Australian issue.
But do you think that there's actually what to do? Like, can they actually change this terrible state?
Look, yes, I do, because I think there are certainly things that can and ought to be and must be done, and things that ought to have been done over the last 2 years but haven't. The Prime Minister Albanese, who has received quite a fair bit of criticism from the community, and I would say that perhaps shown some indifference, some cold-heartedness towards the community, both before and, quite frankly, after the attack as well. He has implemented already a number of steps, and I think they're welcome, but they really should have been done years ago. We need a royal commission now, which the government is sort of fighting back on, because ultimately this is an issue that transcends states, and we need to look at this isn't just an intelligence failure. This is a leadership failure, and we need to look at the causes. But at the end of, there's also, I should add, last year that appointed a special envoy for combating anti-Semitism, Gillian Siegel, and she produced an extensive report with a whole list of recommendations that had sat on the government's desk for months and months. They need to be implemented, but at the end of the day, Zvika, the issue is you can have all the laws of the world, but they are entirely meaningless in the absence of political willpower to enforce them, and that is, I think, what needs to change.
Just lastly, you're staying. I'm gonna guess that you're not coming back to Israel. You're gonna stay there and fight.
I'm fighting, Zvika.
No, I meant.
Yeah.
You're on the battlefield, and you're staying there.
Look, absolutely. I have a mission ahead of me now. I can tell you, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, they were not going to push me around. And these anti-Semites and terrorists, they're not going to push me around either. I came here with a mission to work with the Jewish community to combat the scourge of anti-Semitism, to support Israel and the Australian-Israel alliance. There's no terrorist in the world who's going to tell me how or where to live my life.
Right. So Arsen, I really appreciate your time. I'm sure everyone's driving you crazy there and wanting you to give them a bit of attention. And I want to wish you and your family, process of healing and the ability to have a bit of a normal life, after all of this and the war in Israel and everything,
Yeah.
But
We'll settle for a bit of mundane and for the time being, but I appreciate you
yeah,
talking and appreciate
yeah.
everything you and the JPost doing to help share our stories.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For more news, podcasts, analysis, and the latest updates, head to jpost.com.